Welcome to the Writer's Journey podcast. I'm Michael Laran, a science fiction and fantasy author on a journey to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I pull back the curtain on my writing life and how I'm building a writing career while working a full-time job, raising a family, and attending law school classes in the evenings. You can find show notes for this week's episode, a free starter library of my fiction, and much more at michaellaran.com. Hello and welcome to episode 147. 147 is a good number, and this week I titled the name of this episode Half a Novel in 1 Week. And that is because that is what I'm going to talk about. So I started my new challenge, and I'm going to talk about how dictating my newest challenge on an exercise bike into the dark in one draft is going. So maybe this will be a fun episode. This will be a bit of a shorter episode this week because I recognize that it is going to be New Year's. I know many of you are probably going to be celebrating New Year's, doing something at home, if you go out, stay safe. And so just in observance of the holidays, this episode of The Writer's Journey will be a little bit shorter. But I did want to tell you, just as a final thing, today is the last day as this goes live, December 31st, 2020. This is the last day to get 20% off any of my writing books on authorlevelup.com. So at checkout, use the coupon code use the coupon code TrueFan2020 to get 20% off your order. So you can order one book, you can order multiple books, get 20% off of everything. So this goes away at midnight on December 31st. This is just a thank you to all of you for supporting me this year. And I don't know when the next sale I'm going to run will be. All right. Now, another announcement. I am going to be talking about my journey with this new challenge, with this exercise bike and all that stuff. But I did want to let you know that if you want to follow along, I am blogging my progress and my thoughts every single day at authorlevelup.com/blog. That's authorlevelup.com/blog. I'm also syndicating this to my YouTube community tab. So if anyone likes to follow me on YouTube, you can do it that way as well. It'll show up in your feeds, or you can just check my channel every day and look at the post. I usually post around 8 to 10, somewhere between 8 and 10 o'clock every night. All right. Now, wins for the week. I'm not going to talk about any wins for the week because that is the topic of the week. And I'm not going to talk about any lessons learned because this is not really a time or season right now for learning this week with the holiday and all that stuff. I've learned a lot, but I'm not going to share anything. But I did want to share an idea of the week that I thought would be a really interesting one. So I'm writing this new book right now, and this book is set in a city that I've been to many times, but I'm not a resident of that city. So like the city itself is a very important part of the setting. And so what I'm going to be doing in the next few weeks or so is I'm actually going to be putting out a call to action, I don't know what you call it, a job posting or whatever, for a consultant, someone to read certain sections of the novel as a native or as somebody who has lived in this city for a long time. And let me know, did I get it right? Is there something that I got wrong? Is there something that a long-time native would never say, like they would never even bring that up? Or maybe there's some sort of issue that's going on with the city that people are livid about, that sort of thing, to give it more realism, to make it feel like the city is lived in. All right, and that is an idea that I'm going to be implementing here in the next few weeks. But that got me thinking about this idea to share with you, and that is this idea of a genre consultant. So what if it were true that there were people who had a very deep understanding of a genre? So like I always use urban fantasy because that's the one I know the most. I read urban fantasy every week. I'm always reading an urban fantasy novel, and I've learned a lot about the genre. But I bet there are readers out there who are masters. I mean, they just know everything. You say, hey, I'm looking for a book that's similar to blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, oh, then they'll just give you a giant list. I mean, just go to any reader community on Reddit, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And I think this would be a great way for readers to make some money. If you're one of those write-to-market writers, or if you're writing in a new genre that you're not familiar with, why not hire a consultant? I was watching the newest Pixar movie over the weekend, Soul, And fantastic movie, by the way. It's one of Pixar's best movies they've done in a long time, with the exception of Coco. Coco was, I thought, one of their best. This is not quite at the level of Coco, but it kind of harkens back to the old Pixar days. So it just was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. And I happened to be watching the credits, and in the credits, because this movie takes place in the African American community, and jazz is a focal point, they hired a lot of consultants, famous jazz musicians like John Baptiste and Herbie Hancock, and other famous jazz musicians to consult on the soundtrack and write music for it, so that the jazz was authentic and it was allowed to shine. There were also people who were consultants. I think it was for like the African American community, making sure that the images in the story were good, and the lighting on the character's skin was realistic, that sort of thing. And I just thought that's a great idea for an author to do. Now, you don't have to go on that scale, but just think about that. I mean, think about your current work in progress right now. I bet that there is something that you're writing about that you don't have subject matter expertise on, right? In this novel I'm writing right now, there's at least 2 areas where I don't have that subject matter expertise. I think at least 3. So why not get some help, to make it look more realistic and make it feel realistic, so that readers don't question what you're saying. And if you look at the mega bestsellers, the most successful writers in the world, John Grisham's, James Patterson's, Nora Roberts of the world, that's what they do. I don't know that they do that 100%, but I do know that they do an extensive amount of research, and they talk to people, and they use people as consultants to make sure that everything in the novel is copacetic, so to speak. So why can't we do that? It's a professionalism thing. All right. So anyway, topic of the week. I wanted to talk about how this challenge is going. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, I'm going to repeat it again, and I'll give the backstory because I know some people are coming in on this and are not familiar with it. So a few months ago, I bought an exercise bike, and I got it on Facebook, like the Facebook buy and trade community. I was just looking for an exercise bike, just something to put in my office so I could hop on the bike and get some exercise. And I happened to find an exercise bike that had a desk on it. So it's like a recumbent exercise bike, so you sit back and you pedal, and it's like a regular bike, but it's got a desk attachment on it. So you can convert it into a desk, and you can put your computer on it or put a tablet on it or whatever that looks like, and pedal and multitask. And so I was like, okay, that's really cool, but I didn't really know what to do with it. And so the bike, I used it for a few weeks and, felt pretty good. And then it started to gather dust a little bit, as many pieces of exercise equipment do. And I don't remember what happened. I decided to buy Dragon. So you guys know that I've used Dragon for quite a bit. I used Dragon to write an entire series back in 2016, and it was cool, but I used Dragon for Mac, and Dragon is no longer supported for Mac. It's a complete disaster. So now that I have this new computer, I can run Windows on the computer, and I can run Windows and Mac side by side. So I was like, okay, this would be a really cool time to bust out Dragon again and maybe kind of get familiar with it and figure out how to do that. And so that was part 2. So I bought this exercise bike. It started to gather dust. Then I bought Dragon, and then I was like, okay, it'd be kind of fun to play around with Dragon and maybe get some exercise in and all that. So this idea came together of, what if I had an exercise goal? Because I'm fat and I need to lose weight. What if I got on a bike, like for 30 minutes or 60 minutes a day, and I pedaled on the bike, just like regular exercise. But while I pedaled, I dictated a novel, just like I did with my last Dragon Lord series. And what if I dictated this novel into the dark, meaning no outline? And then what if I did this novel in one draft, meaning no revision? I mean, I'm going to revise. Don't misunderstand me on that. But and then what if I did all of this in public? And that's kind of why I'm crazy. So I basically the challenge was, I set some ground rules in the beginning. I ended up changing one of those rules, and I'll talk about that. How it started was, I was going to get on the bike for 30 minutes to 60 minutes a day. And while I was on the bike, I would dictate. And the only time I could write this particular novel, because I was going to start a brand new urban fantasy series, why not, right? Just start fresh. The only time I could write was on this bike. And I did it for the first couple of days. I did a few test days, and everything went great. And I had some pretty decent word counts. So in 30 minutes, I'm averaging about 1,000 words. My lowest was like 600 words per 30 minutes, and then my highest was like 1,500 words for 30 minutes. But both of those were outliers. Most of the time, I'm right around 1,000, 1,200 words every 30 minutes. So if you do the math on that for an hour, you have a pretty substantial word count for the day. And so I started doing some math on the first few days because I was getting like 2,500, 3,600, 4,000. And I started doing the math, and I'm like, oh, okay. So if I dictated 3,600 to 4,800 words per day, that would get me, I think it was like 2 million words per year, which is an insane number. And then because I guess I can't stop thinking about this stuff. So it's like, okay, the math checks out. That's pretty cool. So if I did 3,600 to 4,000 words or 4,800 words a day, which is doable with the dictation, then that would be a really handsome word count. I would probably end up writing 2 to 3 novels per month. And I was like, okay, that's really intriguing. That's really enticing. And so then I changed one of my rules. I said I was only going to write it when I was on the bike. About 3 days in, I said, no, I'm just gonna blow the lid open. I'm gonna get on the bike as much as I can throughout the day, but I'm also gonna write on my phone, and I'm also gonna write by hand, and we're gonna see where the word counts go. So it ended up becoming like a second beast mode challenge. So where I'm at right now is I have written, as I record this, about 27,000 words of fiction. And I am approximately 9 days into the challenge. This will probably be a 50,000 word novel, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So I am past the halfway point at this point. And the way I'm writing these last couple of days, I think I'll probably finish this sometime either over the weekend or for New Year's or very early next week. So that's the kind of results I've been getting. And it was really weird, like hopping on an exercise bike and then speaking your novel. Because what I did is I attached a microphone boom arm to the bike, to like the desk, and I put my Blue Yeti on that. And then I put my laptop on top of the desk. And so then as I dictate, I can kind of see what is ending up on the screen. And for the most part, Dragon is not that hard to use. I tend to dictate pretty clean. So it does make some errors, like it'll misunderstand words here and there, or it'll accidentally drop an article, but it's actually not that bad. Dragon for Windows is way better than Dragon for Mac is in terms of accuracy. I mean, it's way 1,000 times better. I mean, it's not even a contest. I don't even know why I bought the Mac version, to be honest with you. But yeah, so half a novel and 28,000 words. And so what I was looking at was, what does this translate to in other terms? Because like, yeah, that's interesting. That's cool, right? But like, what does it translate to in other things? So like every hour, how many calories am I burning? Every hour, how many miles am I biking? How much time total am I spending on the bike? And then another element that I added in today, how much weight am I losing? And so I want to read some of these numbers to you just to kind of show you how this has been going. So at the moment, I'm at around 27,000 words. And this is, like I said, day 9. I've burned approximately 850 calories. It'll be more after today, but 850 calories. This is where I was as of yesterday. And I've biked 25.5 miles. And the total time I've spent on the bike has been around 8.5 hours. So a little bit more than a work day I've been on the bike, if you add up all the time together. And something I found out today, and it was by accident because I happened to go to the doctor's office and they had to weigh me. I wasn't really paying that much attention to it, but I've lost 4 pounds since I've started this. So in the 2 weeks-ish that it's been, maybe a little bit more because I've been on the bike a little earlier than that, I've lost 4 pounds already. So half a novel is worth 4 pounds. losing 4 pounds. It's really, really interesting. I've been watching what I've been eating, and um, really, I spent about 30 to 90 minutes on the bike every day, and I feel great. Someone asked me, like, what are the other benefits you're seeing? And I've noticed that I have more energy throughout the day. I'm sleeping a lot better, and that's pretty cool. And I just feel great throughout the day, and it's not like moderate exercise. It's just a fair amount of exercise that I'm getting, and it feels really good. So, if you do the math on that and you double all the numbers I just gave you, a 50,000 word novel might be around, 1,600 calories, 50 miles, and 16 hours, and then I might end up with the pleasure of losing 8 pounds as a result of this. And I think that's really cool. And it's a great, I don't know, it's just kind of fun to look at the numbers that way. Even I don't know, it's just an interesting challenge. And so one of the things that I've been blogging about every day has been some of the in the moment. What are some of the challenges that I'm dealing with as I'm writing this? Because people have found that helpful. So when I first started the book, I had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, I literally sat on a bike and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I literally have a very faint idea in my head about what this story is going to be like. And I don't know what it's going to look like. And I started speaking, and lo and behold, I had 500 words, and I just kept going from there. And so I took nothing and turned it into something, which is it never gets old. But the biggest challenge I had in the beginning was just getting the voice right. Like it felt really wooden, like my own personal voice. It felt really wooden, and like everything that went down on the page, it just felt like, is this really like what I want? But then, when I looped back through what I had written for the day and just kind of cleaned up some of the errors and all that, it was fine. But it was just the very act itself of speaking a novel without using your hands. It's like relearning how to write again, in a way. Like, if that makes sense. Like, you're probably used to typing on a keyboard, and that's how you write. And some of you may be used to typing on a phone, and that might be part of how you write. It's a totally different experience to speak your novel. And fortunately, I've done this before, so it's not. I think that part of it actually came back easier than I thought, because I know a lot of people I've talked to, they're like, I just don't know how you take the story in your head and get it onto the page and just tell a story without stopping and starting and stopping and starting. And I find that when I'm writing, I'll go like 2 or 3 sentences, and then I'll stop and think, and then I'll go another sentence or two, and then I'll stop and think, and then I'll go another sentence. So it's kind of like a start, stop, start, stop. Like I'm not speaking like I speak now. Like that would be awesome if I could do that, but I that's kind of crazy because I have to stop and think about what I want to say and how I want to say it and then get it down. But I'm trying to push myself to do that as quickly as possible and as cleanly as possible. So that was the biggest first part of this challenge, was just it was almost like I would compare it to like learning how to drive for the first time. Because like when you learn how to drive, you've got to figure out how to operate the car, and then you've got to look around you to make sure you're safe. And there's just so many different coordination that you have to do in order to get that car to drive, right? To get from point A to point B. That's kind of what it felt like, and it was really, really awkward the first couple of days, and then it got really easy, almost like second nature. To the point where I've been hitting, 3,600 to 4,800 words a day without really having to do very much. Another part of this that was something that I encounter a lot with writing into the dark, and this is something I think that scares a lot of people, and it's just part of the exercise, which is that when you write and you're telling a story that you have no idea where it's going to go, sometimes that story can get a little weird, like a little messy. Like I was in the middle of a chapter the other day where I started off the character goes to, I'm not going to spoil anything by saying this, but the character goes to an abandoned factory. All right. And at first I started off, I was like, okay, it's going to be this random abandoned factory on, you know, a blue collar part of town. And then I got about 1,000 words into that chapter. And then I realized, no, this isn't probably what the sentiment of the setting is right, but I kind of wrote myself into a corner. And so then I was thinking, okay, well, are there any landmarks in this city that I could use and just do a lot of research on it and set it there? And sure enough, within searching for 2 or 3 minutes, I found one and it was perfect. So then I started on the story, and the last like 2,000 words of the chapter were in this new setting. So I picked up as if they were already in the setting that I'd researched, and I just wrote that way. And so then at the end of the day, I had to go back to the first 1,000 words and change it to set up the place they were and take out all the abandoned factory stuff and put in the actual location where they were. And that process got really, really messy because I had one half of a chapter saying one thing, the other half of a chapter saying another thing, and then I bled some of that into another chapter. And so I had to do a lot of patchwork to go back and make sure that everything blended and that everything went smoothly. And that took me away from writing new words in order to do that. So my word count that day was actually a lot lower because I had to stop, fix what I needed to fix in the moment so that I could continue. And what I found with writing into the dark, and I don't know if other people have experienced this, is that you'll start off really strong, and then somewhere around the 25% mark, you find that things start to converge, and you have to figure out how to make them like seamless. Like if you've got multiple story arcs or multiple character threads, that's usually where they start coming together, is around the 20-25% mark. So you got to blend those together. And sometimes that requires you to go back to what you wrote previously and fix things. And sometimes you may find that something that you wrote needs to be eliminated because maybe your creative voice took you in a different way. And that's really, really scary to people, especially when you do it the first time. Because yesterday I wrote, I think it was like 2,300 words. And in the very beginning of the morning, I found out that 1,000, it was like 1,300 of those words I didn't need because I wrote myself down a path that I didn't want to go down. And so my creative voice pulled me back and took me in a different direction. So I had to cut that 1,300 words. And that was, a little painful, but that's part of the process. And that's, I did a video on writing into the dark, and I talk about how writing into the dark is almost like faith. Like you just have to have a tremendous amount of faith in your story and in your ability as a storyteller that it will work out. And most of the time it does. Like I started off not knowing what this book was going to be about. It's kind of a weird book. It's just kind of the story. It's kind of meandering when it first starts off, and I promise I'll share more about the story when I'm done with it. But right now it's still forming, and so I don't want to share too much about it. But this is an urban fantasy novel, and most urban fantasy takes place in the head of an established character who is like the best in the world at what they do. So like, the character's a wizard and they're really good at it, or they're a witch and they're really good at it, and they've been a witch for many years, that sort of thing. This story is more of an origin story. So this story is, okay, I have a supernatural character, but he doesn't start off that way. In fact, he has no idea that the paranormal and supernatural world even exists. And then slowly but surely, he starts to come into contact with it. And so the first quarter of the story is a little slow in the beginning, but when it picks up, it really, really picks up. And so that kind of makes this one a little bit different. And also this story is told in the third person as opposed to the first person, which is what most people are used to with urban fantasy. So that I think is a bit unusual too, because the story jumps in and out of a couple of different characters' heads as it progresses. And as the story in like the last half of the story, things really start jumping from character to character. And that's just kind of a fun thing that I've always wanted to try with urban fantasy. I did it a lot with my early novels, and I kind of miss it. So, it's just kind of what I'm trying to do. But the point of the matter is, what does this challenge look like, and what are some of the benefits that I've seen? And I've shared those in terms of the words and the calories. But another benefit that I want to talk about, and it's something that has been a really big takeaway for me, is that I really haven't experienced writer's block in the sense of the term. Like, there's been times when I didn't know where the story was going to go. Like, I'm not going to lie about that. Like, in the very beginning, I had no idea how I set the character up in one scene. I had no idea how they were going to get from that scene to the next. I just wrote it. And I had to pace my office a little bit just to kind of figure that out. But in terms of, oh my gosh, the words aren't coming, this is painful, that hasn't really happened. And what's been really interesting is that if I get on the bike and dictate when I don't know what's going to happen, I found that I can speak my way through the writer's block. And so I wonder, and this is something I want to share with you, I wonder if there is something to, if you have writer's block, get moving. People talk about taking walks and exercising and all that. But might it also be true that if you have writer's block, speaking your way through the story while you're moving, might that be an interesting way to get over it? It would be super awkward at first. I think people would cringe at that. But I can tell you, like, there's usually times in my novel where things just don't, it's tough to sit down at the keyboard, I think everybody has that. That hasn't really happened with this story. And I think part of it is because I'm doing a challenge, and so I know I have to be accountable to all of you. But also, like my creative voice is showing up in a really big way, and it's taking risks that I didn't think it could take. And so how are there some ways that you can get moving when you're experiencing writer's block as a way to help you break through that? That's something that I've been really, really intrigued at the fact that I have not had writer's block with this book, even though I've had the same feelings, like around the 25% mark. I don't know how this is going to go. Around 35% mark. I don't know how I'm going to get that character from point A to point B, but it always works out. And the reason it works out is because I get on the bike and I speak my way through it. So just a takeaway, try it. Maybe there's something there. I bet there's some neuroscience or something that supports this. But anyway, that's all I have to say for this week. But I hope everybody has a safe new year. Please stay safe. There's just a lot of crazy people out there right now, especially New Year's is always a dangerous holiday. It's one of my least favorite holidays, to be honest with you, just because of all of the drunk driving and just the bad news that you always see on New Year's Day. So just stay safe. How amazing is it that we have gotten through 2020? That's a pretty impressive feat given all the things that have gone on this year. And here's to hoping that you have a safe new year and amazing wishes for 2021. And I'll be back next week with more stuff. Hopefully, maybe knock on wood, this novel will be done and I'll have some more stuff to share about how that goes and how I was able to write a novel in 2 weeks. And so with that, peace, and I'll talk to you in 2021. Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy my backlist episodes at michaelaran.com/podcast. For your free starter library of my favorite novels, join my fan club by visiting michaelaran.com/fanclub. If you're a writer and want to connect with me further, check out my YouTube channel, Author Level Up, for helpful writing advice at authorlevelup.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.